When I was younger, I used to hang out with a girl named Alyssa. She wasn't exactly a good influence on me, and we would often run around her neighborhood at night, seeing as all of the adults at her house worked night shifts. This particular day, we had brought along a girl named Caitlin, who, despite being a complete psychopath, we let tag along with us on our adventures. These adventures consisted of walking 2 miles to the Target at the nearby shopping center and taking ridiculous photos. What else are teenage girls supposed to do on a Friday night? All the while trying to avoid getting kicked out for messing with the merchandise. Nothing too major. I remember once we wound up all of the wind-up snow globes and created a symphony of creepy carnival music, and another time we had a chocolate syrup fight and managed to flee before we got caught. Once we ran out of ideas, though, we decided it was time to take photos on the giant red balls that decorated the entrance before heading home. A planking photo here and a silly pose there. It wasn't like we were vandalizing the property. Suddenly, this lady comes running from the parking lot as Alyssa finishes taking my photo. She looked not a day over 20, and was dressed really well considering the fact that she was just picking up a few things from Target. With her shopping bag and car keys in hand, she introduced herself to Alyssa and Caitlin as a member of a nearby church we had never heard of before. Since I was the most reasonable and well-mannered of the group, I made my way over to her and asked what exactly she wanted from us. I thought she would yell at us for taking silly pictures that were slightly provocative. Sitting on a giant red ball and sticking your tongue out wasn't exactly innocent when you're 14 years old. But instead, she merely smiled and said that she wanted to baptize us. What? I glanced at Alyssa, using my best friend telepathy to ask her if I had just heard this crazy bitch right. The look of disbelief on her face confirmed that, yes, this lady from God knows where had just come up and said she wanted to baptize us in front of Target. We turned our attention back to her, as she nervously chuckled. Actually, I've already been baptized. Oh, really? That's fantastic. But I'm not talking about just any baptism. I mean baptizing you in the name of the Holy Spirit. No, I've already been confirmed too. I just got confirmed a couple of months ago, actually. Well, this is different. Come on, don't be nervous. It's God we're talking about. Well, at that point, I guessed politely refusing her wasn't going to fly. I thought that it might be a good idea to try a more direct approach. Look, we really have to get going. Oh, no. It won't take longer than 5 minutes. I promise. Keep in mind that it's about 10 p.m. in early November, so the odds of this happening should be 0, since we're nowhere near a church, and there's no way that she had just left some sort of Christian youth group that just so happened to encourage her to go out and give blessings to teens she deemed were heading down a path of destruction. We all looked at each other nervously, but unanimously decided that letting this crazy lady do whatever she wanted was better than starting a scene. Besides, we were surrounded by people, and one scream would more than suffice for a security guard to run over. Awkwardly, and trying our best not to burst out laughing from the nerves and the fact that we were actually going along with it, we held hands and stood in a circle. She began to recite a prayer and closed her eyes. We took this chance to look at each other, and nodded in agreement that this wasn't as bad as we thought, and it might be soon over. Then she started to yell her prayer, and reached out towards my head. What are you doing? Oh, don't worry, I'm just going to let the Holy Spirit enter your body. Look, I don't think I'm very Before I could finish, she already had her hand firmly on the top of my head, and had begun reciting another prayer. Caitlin lost it at this point and burst out laughing, which caused a chain reaction that made Alyssa laugh, which made me burst into hysterics, and ultimately made our delusional acquaintance giggle. Oh, you're laughing. Don't worry, it must be God. I looked over at Alyssa with a tear in my eye and mouthed, "What the fuck?" Don't worry, you're just drunk. Drunk off Jesus. It happens all the time. It's good. It's supposed to happen. Oh, this is just great. I'd never met anyone else who was so captivated by God. Since we were right in the parking lot, cars began slowing down as she repeated the steps on Alyssa and Caitlin. This realization made us laugh even harder. Once she was done, she told us to stop by our church sometime, and that we would definitely be welcome there. We nodded and said our goodbyes, and just like that, she was gone. To this day, I have no idea what drugs that lady was on, or if the crazy train had finally derailed within this dedicated member of the Christian faith.
So I've just got back from the store and I've got to share this experience that I've just had with you guys. It may not be as scary as some of the other guys' encounters here, but it gives me chills, no doubt. Let me start off by saying that this morning I wasn't in the best of moods. I had to work graveyard last night and I woke up after only 4 hours sleep with my back killing me. I couldn't get back to sleep, so I decided that I would go and do some errands that I needed to do since I was now wide awake. I needed to get my hair cut while I was out. My sister worked at a salon that's right next to Target, so after I got my sister to sort out my hair, I popped over to Target to grab a few things before I headed home. So I was pushing my cart down the frozen food section. I turned the corner to go to the next aisle. When I did, there was this middle-aged lady that was pushing this cart heading in the opposite direction. I nearly bumped into her and stopped just before our carts collided. She gave me this mean look and said in a real bitchy tone, "Excuse me?" Now again, I have to say, I wasn't in the best of moods at the time due to lack of sleep. I'm short-tempered naturally, so without thinking, I shot back at her and said, "Shut up, you're fine." Call me an asshole if you want, but no one's perfect. But it's what happened next which is just pure insanity. The lady then suddenly left her shopping cart and started following me. I noticed this about halfway down the aisle and I turned around to ask what her problem was. And then, I shit you not, she rolled her eyes into the back of her head, pointed at me and screamed very loudly. When I say screamed, I mean shrieking at the top of her lungs. It was like something out of The Exorcist. I hurried down the aisle to get away from this insane lady, but she started running after me. Needless to say, all the bystanders immediately stopped what they were doing and just stared at us. This lady kept on screaming like a banshee at the top of her lungs while she chased me around the store. Well, I noped the fuck out of there. Didn't feel like explaining the situation to an employee and I couldn't stand the sound of her screaming at such a high pitch. I ran out of the exit of the store. I looked back into the store as I headed for my car. The lady was just standing outside the now open automatic sliding doors, but she was still inside the store, if that makes sense. While she stood there with her mouth wide open, she was just staring and pointed at me, and her eyes were still rolled in the back of her head. All you could see is the white of her eyes. She suddenly turned around and briskly walked back into the store. I decided to pick up my stuff at Walmart just down the street instead. All I could say to myself for the entire drive home was, what the fuck was that? Creepy screaming possessed banshee lady? Perhaps I shouldn't have been so rude to you, but you still must have at least one screw loose in your head.
I had a rather odd experience last year in a Target with my friend. She and I were just shopping in the clothing section when a decent-sized group of people came in, apparently arguing because they were yelling at each other, it seemed. The area this Target is in is kind of crappy, so my friend and I just rolled our eyes at each other and made some snarky, always classy here type of comment. As we continued shopping, it suddenly occurred to us that it had been a couple of minutes and the yelling was still happening. Furthermore, it was just one woman's voice going. Pretty far away, but still audible at this point because she was yelling so loudly. We couldn't figure it out from our distance if she was speaking English or another language. We thought this was all odd, but kind of tried to ignore it. Well, as we were about to go into the shoe section, we saw that the person yelling was in there, and was alone. She wasn't with the group at all, and had just happened to walk in at the same time as the group of people had. She was just standing there, all alone, screaming something out very loudly. As we got closer, we started realizing that she was switching back and forth between English and some other language. She was dressed how I've seen Haitian women dress in documentaries, and her accent in speaking English definitely sounded Haitian, so that seemed to fit. As we got slightly closer, we were finally able to make out more of what she was yelling. She was yelling something along the lines of, "I said it's time to kill more babies," then switching to a different language and saying the same thing. She just kept going on like that, just walking slowly and alone, yelling super loud and going back and forth between English and what I thought was Creole. My friend and I were really creeped out, so we decided to run for another part of the store. We were looking at stationery when we heard the lady's voice slowly getting closer again. It sounded like she was coming up toward the row across from us, but I think we figured she'd just keep moving past. Well, that didn't happen. We heard her voice get to the row across from us, separated by the main aisle, and as I looked at stationery, I saw her turn and walk into the row from the corner of my eye. I realized in the same moment that my friend had just deserted me and gone around to the next row. This woman had not stopped yelling her craziness, and so, as I saw in the corner of my eye that she had stopped and was standing there yelling, I finally turned slowly on my heels to face her. She stood there, looked me right in the eyes as I faced her, and yelled, maintaining eye contact, "I said it's time to sacrifice more babies!" At which point I slowly turned on my heel again, walked around the corner, and grabbed my friend. We noped the hell out of there shortly after. I still cannot believe no security guards came and got her in the time we were there, which was probably a good 15 or more minutes, and that Target has several guards. I have no idea how I was so calm at the time, because later in the day I was totally freaked out by it. Just a weird situation.
This story isn't overly scary, but certainly made me feel frightened at the time. I used to work at Target in Melbourne back in 2003 when I was 18. I'm not what you would call an average female. I'm 6'2", lots of tattoos, and not hard to miss if you want to come to where the checkout is. A quick layout of the store: it has 3 levels, including a basement where the DVDs are stored at, and I used to do a few shifts there. The majority of the time I would spend working at the checkouts. One shift, an older man with grey hair and glasses came to the checkouts. First thing I noticed is that he didn't have any products to buy. He says, "Wow, you remind me of my granddaughter." Harmless, right? I smiled and joked about how she must have been a great girl. He then began to ask me about my family and how I grew up. Being from Adelia, I knew I probably didn't know this man. It was weird, but not unsettling. Thankfully there were customers behind him, and I politely said I needed to get back to work. He smiled and said that he might bring in some photos to show me one day. I smiled and he left. I didn't think about the encounter at all after that. Well, not until 2 weeks later, when he was back. I wasn't worried, but just annoyed being 18 and not interested. He showed me photos of his granddaughter and family, and there was a very slight resemblance again. Being a busy store, I had a lot of work to do and excused myself to go back to the work. He stood in the store staring at me for a long time, which I started to notice, making me extremely uncomfortable. My biggest mistake was not letting my supervisor know at the time. I didn't really tell anyone except for a friend who asked me who he was. Skip to 3 weeks later and, yep, you guessed it, there he was. But this time he looked sad. He managed to get aside me as I was walking to my break. The photos he showed me were of a funeral this time. First of all, who the fuck takes photos at a funeral? Anyway, he said his daughter and granddaughter were murdered by his son-in-law and he missed them very much. I kind of felt sorry for him, but something he said sent shivers up my spine. I know that you're my granddaughter, so I'm so happy to have found you again. What the fuck? My face went red as it does when I get nervous. I don't think so, sir. I miss you so much. He began to cry and grabbed my arm. He tried to hug me, but luckily one of my tall managers walked by and pulled him away. Hey Grant? Do you still need help with that cage? Grant looked confused, but must have seen my unease because he nodded. Yeah, that would be good. I looked back at the crying grey old man and smiled nervously. We got in the elevator and I escaped upstairs. I then told my manager what was happening and they noticed how much this was freaking me all out. Thankfully, I didn't see this man for a few weeks. Having a week's holiday helped a lot. A friend did say that she saw him around and he was actually looking for me. I came back to work and not a week later I came to the front registers to start my shift and I saw him. Luckily he didn't see me though. I stopped and headed back to the elevators. I found my manager and told him what was going on. He told me to go downstairs to the basement and stay there until he came and got me. I didn't know what happened except what I was told. Apparently the man started yelling and saying that his granddaughter worked here. He started yelling that he needs to see me. The security manager tried for about 10 minutes to get him out of the store. He had with him photos, female clothing and a bracelet. I can only assume they were from his granddaughter. He started screaming his granddaughter's name and had to be dragged out of the store. From that day on I spent most of my time in the basement working the registers here. I left that job to move back to Adelia soon after. I did kind of feel sorry for the man having suffered such a loss. He obviously wasn't good at accepting deaths and obviously had some kind of problem.
What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys for making it this far, especially if you made it to the end of the video. I'd also like to give a special thanks to my co-narrator this episode, Insomniak. He's a pretty awesome guy, and he narrates true scary stories as well, so if you guys enjoyed his narration this episode, there will be a link to his channel in the description, and probably somewhere in an annotation in the video, so be sure to go and check him out. If you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback below in the comments, or perhaps leave a like, share, or subscribe if you guys feel so inclined. If you guys have any particular stories you'd like me to read, any particular themes you'd like to see, or any personal stories you'd like to send in, please feel free to take a look in the description. There will be links to all of my social media, including my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. So you can send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to include your story in a video as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please feel free to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, what the theme is if it has any, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story is used in. If any of you are curious about the music used in this video, the music is always listed in the description below. It's listed in the order the tracks appear in the video, as well as by name, and I have links to the artists as well if you want to check out more of their work. So if you like the music and you're curious about it, it's in the description, so you can go ahead there and check it out. For a last little thing, since you guys have been really supportive of the No Sleep series so far, and I'm getting ready to branch into creepypastas and stuff, I figured that I'm going to try and do the SCP series as well. That's probably going to be more of a casual type series, So we'll see how that goes when I finally do decide to make one of those videos, but be forewarned, SCPs are usually pretty short, so that content wouldn't be replacing any of the true scary stories or anything like that. If you guys have any constructive criticism, please feel free to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve upon the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.